Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. The title of our video today is Giving Generously. And this is section number 61 in our study of Jesus' life and ministry based on the Gospel of Mark. The text we're going to look at today is in Mark chapter 12, verses 41 through 44. It's right down at the end of the chapter. And so we're going to be reading it as we normally do from the Simplified New Testament, which is my translation of the New Testament. And this is a very interesting story where Jesus saw something, observed something, and then called that act, what he saw, to the attention of his apostles and used it to teach an important lesson. And I think it's a lesson that many church leaders need to understand, or at least the idea that grows out of this text is one that church leaders need to understand, as well as every Christian. Okay, so let's read this text and see what Mark has to tell us about this event. Jesus went and sat down across from the box where people brought their temple offering. He watched as many rich people put in large amounts. But when a widow came who put in only 2 small coins worth less than a penny, Jesus called his followers' attention to her and said, "This poor widow has really put in more than all the others. Wealthy people give a lot because they have a lot, and after they give, they still have a lot left. But this widow, in her deep poverty, gave everything she had." Now, what does this text mean? What does it teach us about this concept of giving? Well, let me back up and give you a little bit of history so we know what's going on here. When God established the Mosaic covenant back long ago in ancient history with Moses, and you can read about it in Exodus chapter 20, the establishment of the Mosaic covenant. Part of what he established was a process of tithing. Tithe had to do with giving 10% of your income. Whether you're a farmer and you grow crops, or whether you keep sheep or goats or a combination of both, whatever it is you do, you're out of the income you earn under the law of Moses, you were to give 10% of it to the Lord, and this served as a way to finance or manage the tabernacle and the priesthood and the religious system that they had. And so there was giving, and you had to tithe. And here in this text, when it talks about people putting money in the temple treasury, the way they accomplished that, simplest thing to do, was they had a large box set up outside, and people would come when it was their time, and they had income to give. As they were giving their tithe, they would just bring it to the temple and put it there. Well, while they're doing that, there was a woman, a widow, right? And she wanted to give as well, but all she had was 2 small coins, and they weren't worth very much. It says they weren't even worth a penny, but it's what she had. And when Jesus observed this, he was very impressed. He wasn't impressed with the rich people giving lots of money. He was impressed with this poor widow giving just what she had. And what she gave was all she had. And what he said was, in truth, she's really given more than the others, because though the amount was less, the sacrifice was bigger, because after she gave that, she didn't have anything left. You see, the wealthy people, after they made their offering, they still had plenty of money left. This poor widow didn't have anything. Now, I suspect that she probably was somehow receiving very small amounts of money on a daily basis, and she had money to buy just what she needed, maybe enough flour to make some bread and whatever. And she was able to get by. And after she bought what she needed, she had these 2 coins left, and she wanted to give those to God, probably as a way of thanking him for taking care of her, because she had no one else to take care of her. And so whatever she had, it came from God, and she knew that. So what is it that we learn from this? Well, there are a number of things that we learn from this. And there are a number of things that we have to think about in relationship to this larger question of giving, because we're no longer under the old covenant, which required 10%. We're under the new covenant, which doesn't specify an amount. It just says, give what you can. And so there's another text, and I'm not going to go there and read this text or anything like that today, but I'm going to tell you, and you can go read it yourself. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 11, where Paul is encouraging the believers in Corinth to be ready to make an offering to the poor saints in Jerusalem. And when Paul comes through Corinth on his way to Jerusalem, he'll pick up that offering. And what he encourages them to do is give what they can. He said, I want you to think about it and purpose in your heart how much you want to give, and then give that amount. And notice he doesn't say, you're required to give 10% or anything of that sort. Now, you find lots of preachers today who will tell their people that the requirement is 10%. They should be given 10%. Well, that's false. That's wrong. There is no requirement in the New Testament for what you are to give. You're to give what you're able to give. If it's a lot, give a lot. If it's only a little, then just give that. There is no amount. And people will say, well, but under the law of Moses. But we're not under the law of Moses, okay? And I keep saying that because it's important that we understand that. The law of Moses was fulfilled and set aside, every single part of it. There isn't any aspect of the law of Moses that is still in force today and that Christians must obey. We don't obey the law of Moses. Okay, we're under the new covenant that was established on the day of Pentecost. We're under the new covenant. And the new covenant doesn't specify an amount. It says, give as you have been prospered. If God has prospered you a lot, then give a lot. If he hasn't prospered you all that much, then you don't have to give a lot because you don't have a lot to give, right? Give what you can. Now that's an important concept. And it makes it incumbent on us to think about how much we have to give in support of missions and ministry. Now, there are a lot of churches out there today that have huge complexes, big sprawled out buildings, and they hire a very large staff, several ministers and lots of secretaries and lots of other people to do this and that. And in some cases, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, just keeping their building in shape and paying their staff. And then they, when they want to do mission work, they'll have a special offering day where the people are expected to give even more than they normally give to support all of this structure and complex and everything. And that's what they use to give for missions and that sort of thing. And personally, and this is my opinion, is all it is, I think that's probably not a good way to do what God wants us to do. Those large churches with all of those ministers and secretaries and people to do all sorts of different things, that all of that is basically focused right there on that local work and on keeping the members happy. That's what that's all about. And the church is supposed to be about going out, right? And the focus is to be outward, not inward. And if you have an outward focus, then your money, most of your money, is going to be going out, and it's not going to be spent on the congregation and on the people there. But It doesn't work that way in most churches. They spend all the money they have on themselves, and a very small percentage goes to missions. I think that's backwards. But again, that's just my thinking and my opinion, and you may have a different opinion, and that's fine. But what we do have to learn here, what we must understand, is that in the New Testament, there's no tithing. Okay, so don't let anybody tell you you have to give 10%, because you don't. God never required that of anybody in the New Testament. The requirement is give what you can. Be as generous as you can be. The widow gave everything she had. Now, does that mean that you have to give everything you have and then be poor? No, that's not what that means. Don't literalize everything. Don't take it to an extreme. It's like the young man said, "What must I do to inherit the kingdom?" And Jesus, said, "Well, you know what to do. Obey." And he said, "I've already done all that, so I want to do more." And Jesus said, "Okay, well, then sell everything you have and come and follow me." And the man went away sorrowful because he had a lot of money and he didn't want to give all that up. Okay, so people sometimes think Jesus is saying, if you want to be my follower, you have to sell everything and be poor. No, that's not what he was saying, and we covered that in one of our videos. This man wanted to go above and beyond, and that's what he was asking. Above and beyond. He said, "I'm already doing all the stuff that the law of Moses requires me to do," because see, at that time they were still under the law of Moses. And so Jesus said, "Well, okay, then what do you want?" Obviously the man wanted something extra, wanted something more. And Jesus said, "Well, okay, then the more is, give away everything you have and come and follow me." But that's not a requirement to get into heaven. That's not a requirement to be a Christian. Okay, so we have to understand, God doesn't require anybody to be poor. He doesn't require anybody to give up everything they own. Okay, as you study giving in the New Testament, you realize that God's view is the stuff you have is yours. You can keep as much as you want and you can give as much as you want. It's up to you. I just want you to be as generous as you can be. Care about other people and be as generous as you can be in your giving. But you don't have to, sell everything and give it away and take a vow of poverty and go around in ragged robes and barefoot. You don't have to do that. Okay? And there were lots of people in the first century who were Jesus followers that had money, had plenty of money. And they supported Jesus' ministry. That's how they were able to have the money to do their ministry, because there were people who had money and gave to Jesus. Okay, so this whole giving thing is kind of confusing for some people, and we have to be careful. There's no tithing, but you must give generously, and it's up to you to determine how generous you want to be. The woman in this story gave everything she had, and Jesus was very impressed by that. And I can almost guarantee you, although the story doesn't tell us, but just because I know God and I know the way he does things, that later that day or the next day, somebody came along and made a nice contribution to that woman that was a lot bigger than the 2 coins that she put in the box. And this is one of the things that Paul talks about in that passage I told you about, 2 Corinthians 9, 6-11. He said, if you want to give, God will bless you so that you have the ability to give. And just trust in God, and God will give you what you need. And then out of your abundance, you can help other people. And see, that's the way we need to learn to think about this. So giving is something that you decide. God hasn't decided for you. He hasn't told you how much to give. You decide. Should you give something? Yeah. Why? Because God blesses you with stuff. And there are needy people out there. So you need to help them. All right? So you need to give something. But how much? That's up to you. God hasn't dictated that. That's up to you. And so you give a little or you give a lot, depending on how much you have. If you have a lot, you should give a lot. And if you don't have all that much, then, give what you can. That's the fundamental rule. Very basic. So think about this, pray about it, and as you're doing those things, just going about your daily life, always remember, read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.